agenda that we're going to talk about is first is our experience, and then the regulatory pathway selection. In any submission to Food and Drug Administration, really selection of the pathway is very, very essential. Then we're going to talk about the how to expedite the clinical development, and then there are approaches for it. We will refer to it as adaptive clinical trial design, and also then acceptance of foreign data. Every single one of them really refer to expediting the process of getting to marketing approval. Let me first tell you about us. This is kind of look at as an advertisement slide. And basically, for the sponsor point of view, we evaluate their killing. In the last 20 years that we have been doing this, 20 some years before this, I was in FDA and working as an FDA year. We have done so many trials. We have done more than 300 different clinical trials, more than 60,000 patients, and attending and presenting to Food and Drug Administration more than 100 submissions, and got approval. We work both with the sponsor and investors. For the sponsor, the way that we do, we evaluate their clinical products, because in most cases, they don't have that much data other than animal data. And then we present to them full clinical trial and regulatory services. By full clinical trial, I mean starting from the scratch, writing the protocol and submitting it to FDA and all the necessary element of a submission. For the investors, because when we work with investors, they are coming usually with some clinical data. For them, we start by evaluating and validating their trial results, their data. And on top of that, we do some exploratory analyses, because there are times that by looking at the data a little bit more, you will see things that could not see them without an exploratory analysis. And then after that, we present to them, okay, what is the best regulatory approval pathway for them? And that is what we do for the investor versus the sponsors. Let's focus on some regulatory pathway selections. What I'm going to say here is very, very obvious, and it is something that's very clear with respect to the US FDA mandate. They are really the one that matters to us is the bottom one, but I'm going to say some of the obvious one is that they are really the gatekeeper to marketplace with respect to food and drug. And then they also enforce the CGMP, good manufacturing practice. And then the one that matters to us in the pharmaceutical industry is that they are guardian of human safety with respect to clinical trial from the beginning till the end, and even after the product is in market, they use a pharmacovigilance. And so that is the FDA job, really. And with having that in mind, the question that one may ask is that what are the benefits of having a US FDA IND or IDE? IND is for the drug and or biologics. IDE is for the medical devices. The benefit of it is really when you are talking to them, you will hear from them because they are, in most cases, they have a lot of experience in the similar product that you are going to use from other sponsors. Therefore, although they cannot give you any of the information of other sponsors, but they will be able to share with you their experience. So the advices that you may get from the FDA during the IND or IDE presentations, it's really, really priceless because you can hear from them when they are asking you why not doing it this way or that way. There are reasons for it. Obviously, there are other things that by having a US FDA IND is that the opportunities that help you to expedite the program. What do I mean by expediting the program? I will let you know a little bit more. There are approaches that FDA has in helping to expedite the programs. Aside from because you are taking advantage of an unbiased, quote unquote, third party, it adds credibility to the submission. In addition, US FDA, compared to other regulatory, there are 30 days from the time that you submit your IND till the time that FDA has to respond to you. Either if there is no response, that means you can start your trial. And we call it safe to proceed. The main thing that really, on top of all this, what we are doing recently, we are submitting to not only US FDA, we are doing it in Taiwan and other countries or Europe. When we have it to a US IND, US FDA IND, it is more credible, and then almost the same submission we use with minor changes here or there for other countries as well. With respect to approval pathway selection, really one should know that each product is unique. And knowing your own product is essential. I do remember when we were in FDA, we were receiving NDAs or submissions from the same company, but really they were different. The same is with FDA. I have heard from sponsors or clients that say that, oh, FDA has done that one before. The answer is no. FDA is a large organization, and each division, each center has 3 centers: CBER, CDER, and CDRH. CBER and CDER are Center for Biologic Evaluation Research, Center for Drug Evaluation Research, and Center for Device. They are really different, and within each division, you are dealing with different medical officers and different scientists that you need to make sure that you understand their process. Yes, there are global process set, but there are things that you know, by knowing your own product, you will be able to apply what is the best pathway selection for your product. And obviously, you need the scientific justification that is given, and the points that you consider when it comes to submission to FDA. I'm looking at the slides that I passed. The point to consider are maybe in some aspects very common. The general information about the products that you have, and the stage of the development. The sooner it is, the better you can do. We have seen sponsors or investors coming to us and present the situation, but they already have gone to FDA and they have committed to some areas that it makes it harder to. But knowing the stage of development that you are in, and 2 other aspects of it is target population and the indication. That is very, very essential for any submission to the agency. This may be very, very common. By target population, especially when investors come to us, they come to us with data from another pharmaceutical. For whatever reason, they left it. When we look at it, they tell us, quote unquote, for that selected population that they had, it failed. But when we further analyze, do quote unquote exploratory analysis, we'll learn that yes, it is not necessarily a good product for this particular indication, but if you change the population, you have a product to submit. Let me tell you about several expedited programs that FDA has. And knowing I'm sure many people know about different aspects of them. These expedited programs that FDA has, really, their main purpose is to help the sponsor to bring product to market faster. You may be surprised to hear that, but really, and I will go through them and I will explain to you why. As I said, that really, they are designed to provide FDA assistance to you. They are in different levels. And most of the submissions, most of the marketing approval submissions, they use at least one of these expedited programs. I will go through them one by one. Another thing that sometimes people don't know, that these expedited programs may be more than one or two of them applicable to your product. For example, you may have an orphan drug designation because there are a limited number of patient population that they can use your product. At the same time, you may be able to use a surrogate marker as your endpoint rather than using the clinical endpoint. Those are the things that and other aspects of it, by the way, I'll go and I will tell you. You can use more than one of these designations. The breakthrough designation is another one. I'll go through them one by one. Let's start with the breakthrough designation. If your product is designated as a breakthrough, which this one established in 2012, and really it's one of those designations that if you can take advantage of it, it is really very helpful. How do you know that this is applicable to you or not? When you have some of this particular one will be applicable only after you have some clinical data. And the beauty of this designation in particular is that you will talk to the review division. Review division is the division that is going to review your product at the end. So anyway, this one established in 2012, and majority of the designations that we're going to talk about, they say that they are for products that they are serious disease and medical needs. Those are subjective, but we need to be able to look at it and say if this is applicable to you or not, or if you are talking to a regulatory group, ask them to look at it from different angle. Breakthrough is one of those that really is very essential if you can get it. But as I said, this one you can request it at any time after the initial clinical evidence. For this designation, you need clinical evidence. And obviously, because you are talking to a review division, it may help you to reduce some of the non-clinical needs as well as some of the clinical requirements. It's obviously the safety and efficacy is there, and we have to do that. It has fairly larger approval rate as well. Fast track designation is another one that was established long time ago. And again, the same, similar to that, if you can apply this one, you need to, by doing it through fast track, it helps to expedite it. It helps to get it to market a lot faster. And as I mentioned earlier, you can combine it with any other designation. And the approval rate is fairly high. When you request it, to get it is very high. The breakthrough is a little bit tougher, but it's possible. It's very possible. Depends on the product that you have. It depends on the efficacy rates that you have. Accelerated approval was it's another designation that was a long time ago. Again, it was in 1992. I believe it was during the HIV era. And again, this one allows you to bring the product to market faster and be able to present to FDA. And the rate for this one and the next one, this accelerated, and it's fairly harder to get it, and it's applicable to certain product, not necessarily to all of them. Certain indications, not product really. Certain indications, but not to all of them. It depends on the situation that you have, but it's possible if you get it. This is really started with HIV in 1992, and the reason was because of the sponsor wanted to approve an HIV drug based on a biological marker, not based on the quote unquote clinical endpoints. And at that time, CD4 cell count was a biological marker. We call it surrogate endpoint. And so it helps rather than waiting till the clinical outcome is resulted, which usually takes many years or sometimes longer period of time. You look at the biological marker, and based on a biological marker, you can have approval rather than wasting. Let me give you an example for cancer. It's not applicable to cancer anymore, but imagine you have a product for oncology, and imagine that if they accept tumor reduction, they don't accept it as an endpoint, because you will see the tumor reduction a lot faster than saying if the patient survived for 2 years, 3 years or not. Again, tumor reduction is not acceptable surrogate endpoint. And it used to be, now more and more goes through overall survival. But it used to be, another one was progression-free survival, that the disease is not progressing. Anyway, it is harder, but if you can get it, it's very, very, very helpful for the indication and the product that you may have. Priority review, that's another one. It's fairly easier to get it, but again, will allow you to submit your submission a lot faster and get to approval faster. These are and then the orphan drug designation, a lot of, I know, majority clients that we have, if the disease in the US is with less than 200,000 patients annually, you can use this one, and it is very, very common. The newest one is RMAT, Regenerative Medicine Advanced Therapy Design. This is really very, very new, and again, if you can get this one, it's the chance of getting this designation is fairly high. It's about 40%, 36%. Let me tell you about the clinical trial optimization. This is different than the regulatory aspects of it. So in regulatory, you try to find the designations, you try to talk to the agency, and based on that, you expedite the process of getting marketing approval. But looking at the clinical study itself, trying to identify the process, how you can expedite it. Obviously, the way that we do it, we look at the indication, look at the population, and we look at the optimal study necessary. What do I mean by optimal study necessary? People think that you have to do phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3, and they have to do 2 phase 3. Not necessarily. It depends. There are situations that we go from a phase 2 to a phase 3. Yes, if they may require more than one trial, there are situations, but that has to be discussed with the agency. Another aspect of it is that when one is doing a phase 1 study or some proof of concept study, do they need GMP? The answer is yes, but there are ways to do it with quote unquote equivalent GMP. Again, obviously, there are so many aspects of it have to be taken care of and make sure that really it's as close as GMP. Usually we audit manufacturers, make sure that they are equivalent to GMP. When there are many situations that when we go to the agency, we negotiate with them that we do some of the preclinical, necessary preclinical, needed preclinical, we do it in parallel to phase 3. You may not need to do them before you are starting your phase 3. And again, that helps you, because if you don't do it that way, what you need to do, you need to finish all the preclinical one. Although you are doing the preclinical trial and you don't know even if your product gets to the clinical, not only the time, but also the fact that you are spending so much money without knowing that really there is anything in the clinical aspects of it. We go and talk to the agency and try to see if it's possible to do some preclinical studies in parallel to the phase 3 clinicals. Another thing that we do quite often, and that's part of this presentation, and that is using non-US data. And again, I'm bringing this one up because lately we are getting a lot of investors and or pharmaceutical that they bring a product to us that they phase 1 or phase 2 was conducted in outside of US. And the question is that, can we use that one? The answer is absolutely yes. Obviously, there are some certain situations that will apply. We have to evaluate it. But using OUS data, it's really helps to expedite the trial. Another thing that it has been developing last 10, 12 years, they call it adaptive trial design. And that is another way that to expedite the marketing approval. And how that one works, as I said, in the past, it was finishing phase 1, then finish phase 2, and then get the data from the phase 2, analyze it, and then go to phase 3. Not necessarily. It's possible to do phase 2/3. Again, we need to talk about it. And also this adaptive trial design. Again, adaptive, which adapting what? Again, in the past, it was that when you start the trial, at the beginning, any assumptions that you made, you are fine. But when you start trial, you cannot make any changes anymore. About 10, 12 years ago, the FDA started putting out some guidelines that there are possibility that you can change some of the metrics of the clinical trial during the clinical trial based on the information that you are getting from that clinical trial. But all this has to be worked out and discussed with the agency. The adaptive clinical trial design really, it helps, it is very efficient and flexible from both time-wise, money-wise, and even ethical-wise. I will tell you why. It involves, when you start a clinical trial, after, let's say you are going to do it, I'm throwing a number, 300 subjects. After 150 subjects, you do an analysis based on the data that you obtained from this trial, because the way that all clinical trials are done, at the beginning of the trial, based on past information, you do some power calculation, sample size calculation, and you decide you need 300 subjects. And you don't know if this 300 is really, really sufficient. You may need it 340 subjects because the p-value no longer is less than 0.05, it's 0.051, and quote unquote say it failed. But if you do this, starting with 300 subjects, based on the information of the past, and then after 150 subjects, you do an interim analysis, and then you learn that no, you need 350 subjects to make this one successful. The power that you calculated for your study at the beginning was based on data from 10 years ago, 5 years ago, and it's not necessarily correct at the moment. When you do an interim analysis and you base it on the current data, then really that is a lot more accurate. That is one aspect of it. The other aspects of it is that you may learn after 150 subjects that no, this product is not working. So you don't spend multi-million dollar for the next $150. So you may decide to stop it. So that's the adaptive trial design. And another thing that really is very essential, as I said, is phase 2/3. The way that works, if you do finish a phase 2 trial, let's say you use 100 subjects in the phase 2 trial and you finished it. Then you are going to start a phase 3 trial and you need 300 subjects. You cannot use these 100 subjects that are aware of the phase 2 in the phase 3. But if you do a phase 2/3 trial design, you may be able, you will be able to use these 100 patients because this is part of one trial. And that's why at the beginning I mentioned the phase 2/3 trial. We are using this for so many different aspects of it. As I said, you may have 3 doses. You can start with the low dose, high dose, and placebo. And then after an interim analysis, after 150 subjects, you look at the 3 doses and you find out that really the high dose is the one that works, not the low dose. Then at that moment, you can stop one arm of the study, the low dose, and continue with 2 arms of the study, the high dose and placebo. There are so many other things that obviously you need to work with the agency when you are going to design an adaptive trial design. Another thing that we do is changing the ratio. At the beginning, you can start 1-to-3 ratio, 3 active, 1 placebo, and then later on you change it to 2-to-1 or 1-to-1. These are the adaptive trial design that helps you to expedite the process. The good thing that we are using adaptive trial design for US and non-US, and as long as you design it in advance, as long as you are negotiating with the agency in advance, absolutely you can use them in both places, in anywhere really. We have not done it in Asian regulatory, but I do believe that if you discuss with them, there are situations. I do remember when I was an FDA here, we had sponsors coming to us, and they finished a trial, and rather than getting the p-value of 0.049, they got a p-value of 0.07. We say fail. But if they added, rather than 400 subjects, if they had 440 subjects, that would have been 0.049 and would have been quote unquote approved and statistically significant. Again, another aspects of it, stopping a dose that is not efficacious or stopping a trial that is not efficacious very early. We have helped the sponsors doing that and save multi-million dollars, because it's not only the time, it's not only the money, that it's also the time. You will spend another 3 years on something that 3 years later you will find out that 3 years later and several $million later and several hundred patients later, you will find that this product is not working. That's why I said it's ethical and better to do it if you can. The main characteristics of adaptive trial designs is that planning in advance. And that is very essential. And it is extremely important to be able to present it to the agency and tell them what you are going to adapt and why, and what are the characteristics, what are the criteria that you are going to use to stop a dose, for example. I do remember when we did for stopping a low dose, was that we had a low dose, high dose, and control. We present at the interim analysis, we presented the result to a data safety monitoring committee, and purposefully, we did not call them low dose, high dose, and control. We call them X dose, Y dose, Z. And then we asked the committee, without unblinding anything, telling them which dose you recommend. They chose the dose that was both safe and efficacious. So these are the modifications that are essential, and they are really important to do. There are obviously, when you are doing it, there are some you cannot really adapt everything. You cannot change the endpoint. You cannot start the trial till middle of the trial, and then you decide you change the endpoint. No, you cannot do that. There are some limitations, and that's why I say that in advance, you have to talk to the agency and let them know what are the criteria that you are going to change anything, if you do want to change anything, and how you're going to change it, because you have to make sure that all these are done in advance. What are the benefits of adaptive trial designs? To be very frank, in the last 10 years, we always use adaptive trial design because in most cases, I would say almost always have benefit because of that mid-trial indication of safety and efficacy, both safety and efficacy. And it reduced the risk of trial failure, as I mentioned earlier. Rather than if you needed 340 subjects, you will know it in advance and you will adjust it. And obviously, the most important thing is faster and less costly and more ethical. The reason that I'm saying more ethical is because if you learn the product is not working after 150, 200 subjects rather than waiting 400 subjects, obviously, I know the money and the time is important, but also it's ethical to stop it as early as you can. Yes, we have done phase 2. Yes, we have done animal study. Yes, we have done PK, and we think it is working. We are not sure it is working. That's why we are doing a new trial. And then when you do an interim analysis, then you will see that no, it's not working. Stop it at that time. That is what I mentioned by saying it is ethical. What are the risks? Is the regulatory acceptance. You have to go over there and negotiate with them, make sure they accept it or not. As I say, this is case by case. And another thing that is essential is that the integrity of the trial. If you are going to do an interim analysis, we use a term firewall. Those who will know the result and are unblinded, they should not be involved in the day-to-day activity of the trial. The statistical planning is, again, essential in advance, which I will tell you later on when we do parallel processing. You need to do a statistical advance because when you are doing interim analyses, you need to look at the quote-unquote adjustment for type 1 error, and all those have to be done in advance. Logistical issue is also another one. Remember I told you may have 3-to-1 ratio, or you may have, I don't know, low dose, high dose, and control. When you do interim analysis, in the middle of the trial, you are going to change that. If you are going to, from 3-to-1 ratio, 3 active, 1 control, you are going to make it 1-to-1. What it means that now you have to send more control, more placebo to sites. So there are sometimes some logistical planning is needed in advance as well, because it's, if you are going to, after the interim analysis, that you learn some more information about your trial, you may want to modify and change things. Logistically, you should be able to do that. Another approach that we use to expedite the process to get market approval, you may refer to it as being common sense, but we call it parallel execution before trial. What do I mean by that? Is during the IND or IDE application, there are steps that you can do. You don't need to wait. The first question is do we need to go and talk to FDA? Or what we have is very, very obvious. We have the animal study. We have done all the necessary aspects of the trial that we are going to do. We have done that, and we have all the data. Do we need to go and spend 2-3 months, 4 months sometimes, to prepare a submission to the agency and send it to them, and then wait, and then they get, after 60-some days, you go and sit down and talk with them, and then you start trial? You may not need a pre-IND meeting because it's nothing new, and everything that you have is very, very taken care of, all the animal study. So you may want to skip the pre-IND meeting. You may need it, but depends. That's why I say we need to look at it very carefully. Another one is, can you conduct a proof of concept study before going to FDA? Again, that's the part that we look at it. If that's possible, the answer is we prefer to do that one. And there are so many aspects of it that by looking at parallel there are so many things that you should not do it sequentially. There are a limited number of things that you have to do it sequentially. There is no way around it. And that is that doing an animal study, some parts of animal study, and then starting the clinical. There are some other aspects of it that you can do it in parallel. And there are some activity I say that it's, again, we can do it in parallel while you are doing other things, building databases, doing a statistical analysis plans and all that things. This is the way that we refer to parallel processing. It used to be that everything would have been done sequentially. First, you finish the protocol and write and the CR and select the sites, and then start building the databases. And then when the trial finished, you have all the data and start thinking about the statistical analyses. When the statistical analysis finished, start thinking about writing the report. That's what I mean by sequential. There is no reason for that. Really, while you are developing the protocol and developing the case report form, one may start thinking of building the databases. Actually, these days, because of the electronic data captures, you have to do that. Also, again, 15 years ago, that was not the case. Now is the case. You need to submit the statistical analysis plan to FDA. You can do all these in parallel. So by the time that the last patient is out, the time from the last patient out to database log, it becomes very, very, very short. And from database log to writing the report, it can be as low as just few weeks, 2-3 weeks. Why? Because you have done all the statistical analysis that you needed blindly, all the tables that you needed. So it's going to be, and then not only that, you can start thinking of writing the clinical study report, because any study report, 70, 75, 80% of it is of the protocol, the methodology that you are using and all that things. Only 20, 25% of it is basically the data, the result that you are going to do. So there is no reason that you cannot start thinking about the shell of the report in advance. All these are reducing time to the submission and to the approval. Then a question that we get it quite often, especially lately, and this one really has a lot to do with the getting to FDA approval faster. Can we use non-US data? Technically, the answer is absolutely yes. There is no reason that you cannot use it unless it's non-GMP, unless it was not using informed consent. There are some other aspects of it that we need to look at it. And these three questions are really, they are very, very similar, but I purposefully have them here so emphasize on it a bit more than usual. Can we start a phase 2 trial using only phase 1 from outside? The answer is absolutely yes. Limited number of criteria has to apply, but the answer is yes. Can we start a phase 3 trial using data from a phase 2 trial outside, meaning phase 1 and phase 2 was done outside? The answer is yes. Outside US data are, according to guidelines, are legally acceptable as long as the clinical trial meets the following criteria. GCP, obviously, we have to do that. Doesn't matter where you do the trial. You have to follow the rules. And the other ones are subjective, the clinical investigators being recognized competence. Again, yes, we need to make sure that right people are doing the right trials. The scientific evidence, again, that's obvious. Applicable to US population, and medical practice. Again, the answer is yes. If the trial is done in some other country, let's say done in China or Japan, is it applicable to US population? The answer is yes. The reason purposefully I use Japan because of the, sometimes we need to do quote unquote bridging study. If we did a study in US and want to take it to Japan, we need to make sure that it's applicable to that population as well. We use the term bridging study was used long time ago for this purpose. Then the question of why a sponsor use non-US data. The real reason is reducing the cost and also the speed. Why the speed is because there are, I think we were doing a diabetic study in US, it was hard to find population, but when we went to India, because of the change in a lot of things in India, it was easier to find and to recruit patients over there faster. So it is less competition in non-US sites. So that from that angle, it is faster and we can get patients faster. And obviously we need to look over there and there are fairly large PIs that they are very much qualified. The question that often we ask, the percent of split between US and non-US, when it comes to the phase 3, you need to talk about that one with the agency and come up with some understanding. Phase 1, phase 2, as I mentioned earlier, it's not that much limitation. You don't need to worry about that one. Historically, when the FDA started accepting non-US data, they have accepting it for a long time. They accepted for a long time, but the guidelines came out. The first one was 1998. The next one, the latest guideline that came out for acceptance of clinical data to support medical device application and drug application or biologics in the US was in 2018. So it has been around for a long time, and it is well established. You may say, what are the issues that non-US sites potential problem? There are some either logistical issues and or regulatory issues. And you need to pay attention to this, that if you are going to use a trial in Taiwan, I don't know, age over there, here is minimum is 18, over there is have to be over 20. Some of those regulatory that you have to use from the local, those are more applicable. So those you have to pay attention and make sure you are following as much as you can the FDA and that area, but the area that you are using has to be applicable from both regulation and also the practice that they are using. The logistic problem is the translation and also the documentation. They may need less or more. When we are going to use non-US data, we pay attention to the translation, we pay attention to the population, we pay attention to the CV of the PIs. All that are part of it, but you need to take into account when you are going to use them. So you can use them, but you need to pay attention to these components. Just to finish the discussion, to expedite marketing approval, there are really 3 components of it. One is the regulatory component. The other one is using the FDA programs that were developed for this purpose. The third is that when you do the clinical study, try to use quote unquote parallel processing as much as possible. From regulatory approval pathway, obviously you need to look at all the options that are there and then pick the one that is more relevant, more dependent on you, more related to your population, your indication, your product. The accelerated programs, as I mentioned earlier, there are so many of them. Say which one is applicable to you, and more than one of them may be applicable to you. Use them. If breakthrough is applicable to you, use it. If orphan drug is applicable to you, use it. You can, for one product, one submission, you can use multiple accelerated programs. From the clinical studies point of view, try to use minimal requirement. And that is obvious, but it may not be to some. So try to find out what are the optimal requirements that you need to meet. As I said, we use adaptive trial design because we don't want to do a 4-arm dose study in phase 2 to look at that, and then when we finished it, when we go and do only the phase 3. No, you can do it simultaneously. And another thing that we recommend quite often, and that is that doing early communication with the agency. That really helps, because at the end, they are the reviewer. The sooner they know about the issues, the sooner they can help you. Because if you don't go there, if you go there after you finish, they cannot help you. But if you can communicate with them as early as you can, you may save a lot of time, and really they may be able to help you to expedite the submission and the clinical approval. I stop here. I don't know what time it is. I was supposed to talk for, I went over time by 3 minutes. Thank you very much. I'm here to answer any question, and I will listen and learn from you if you have any comments.
Great, thanks, Kazem. We have a few questions that came in during the session on the chat window. So here's one on drug superiority. In terms of drug superiority, can we generally put the approval designation in this order? Fast track, breakthrough, priority review, accelerated approval.
The drug superiority you mentioned, with respect to, for those designations that you mentioned, it can be applicable to any one of them. There are two ones that they are superiority, one product compared to that versus quote unquote non-inferiority. Because if we are comparing it with a placebo, it has to be superior. But if you are comparing with another product that is already in the market, you may be able to do a non-inferiority trial. I'm not sure if I understood the question well, but with respect to designation applies to all of them that you mentioned. All the designation that you mentioned apply to superiority, non-inferiority trial. But again, that's something that you need to discuss with the agency, and the answer is yes, you can use it for superiority trials as well as non-inferiority trials.
Great. Here's one on medical devices. I'd like to know more about the risks of non-US trial data regarding medical devices.
That is very, very good question. Actually, whoever is asking this question is very knowledgeable and knows that a lot of things that I say today mostly is applicable to CDER and CBER. When it comes to CDRH, the devices, you have to be a bit more careful and talk with them. And they have a reason, by the way. The reason that they have is that because surgery and some other thing, that the hand of the surgeon matters. The devices, it matters. However, for the device, also the non-US is absolutely, the answer is yes, is applicable. We went for an IVD to the CDRH, I think it was last year. When we walked in, the sponsor, again, the devices usually are not, as devices company, usually they don't have as much money as some big pharmaceutical companies have. Let's be very frank and honest. So they want to do as much as they can in their own country. And we went to the agency telling them that we are going to do all this in Asian country. And someone in the division said, no, 100% you have to do it here. We presented the data and we presented the reason and all that things. I do believe we agreed at the end, I don't remember, 20% we did in US 80% OUS or 50-50. But it was possible as long as you can present the rationale and you can present why you think that really it's not that much different. But the answer is yes. It is. The short answer is yes, possible.
Great. Just one on the expedited program. If a company is rejected for an expedited program, will reflect poorly on the companies on the organization in the eyes of the FDA?
The answer is absolutely no. You as a sponsor should try all the available programs there to expedite your marketing approval. And as long as what we tell people when we go to the agency, we say, let's review it. Let's make sure that there are chances that FDA, again, rationale is important. The reason that why you think that this is applicable, it's important, all that. So the answer is no. They are not saying that, oh, because you asked this question, therefore we look at you negatively. The answer is absolutely no. Absolutely no.
Gotcha. Just one for investors. Do you have any tips or suggestions on what an investor should look for when reviewing new products or evaluating them?
That's truly the investor's question. Obviously, I think most investors do, and we do that. Get the data, give it to someone totally independent, and ask them to reanalyze the data. Make sure that what you are presented as a p-value, as a mean, a standard deviation, percentage, they are there. And then also looking at it from doing exploratory analyses, validating the process that was used. A lot of these really, when you are presenting data, because investors usually, they have a lot of data in front of them because the previous company, for whatever reason, they do not want to continue that trial. For whatever reason, it's a big company, that product is only gonna bring annually $500 million to them. For them, $500 million is not a big deal. They want to sell it. And they finished the trial, they have all the data, they have done all the analyses, but they decide they don't want to do it because, quote unquote, it failed. The p-value was 0.057 rather than 0.049. So when you, the investor, have these assets, present them to someone to do the analysis, the validation, before taking any next step. You may be able to go back to the agency and very frankly tell them that, listen, the other company did it this way, and we believe that they did not look at this angle and this angle and this angle. Now we are going to present it to you, and we believe that it should get approved. We have had situations like that really, it's possible. The validation and the evaluation and exploratory analysis of the data is essential for the investors when they are going to invest in any of the assets with respect to approval.
Great. Earlier in the presentation, you had mentioned you may not need a pre-IND meeting, but in what cases would you want one of those meetings, and when should you schedule that?
Good question. If you have a new product that's really, it is new in terms of the mechanism of action, in terms of that it's different than all the existing one. It's not another beta blocker too late. Or I think one of our colleagues here, Patrick, used the term another. You don't bring in something that has been there many times, and you know all the necessary preclinical needed and all that things. If the product is totally new, it is better to go to the agency and present to them why you're gonna do this, and then try to learn from them as much as you can, and make them part of the process. Because 5 years from now, 2 years from now, that you're gonna go with the data, that person is the one who also recommended to you. Therefore, he will be or she will be on your team. But If the product is not new, but by the way, preparing and having a meeting with the agency, it takes several months from the time that you think you are going to do it, put together the questions that you are going to ask, put together the submission that you are going to submit, and then request a submission time with the agency. They give you the time to come and meet them. It takes several months. If the product that you have is not that much new, you don't need that. You can put all together and submit it to the FDA, and they have 30 days to tell you go ahead or not go ahead. If you have done your homework very well, there is absolutely no reason you cannot go ahead. But if the product that you have or platform that you have or the device that you have is very new, then really, we recommend to have a meeting with them. The reason is by talking with them, although you're going to lose maybe for a month, but you're going to gain so much after that. What do I mean by that? You may, I don't know, if it's a 505(b)(2), that means a new purpose drug. I always give this example. Aspirin is good for headache. You think it's going to be also good for heart. Okay, you may go to the agency and tell them that, listen, we are not going to do any more animal study. We are only going to, so it saves time for you. I think there was an Asian company came to us. It had, I cannot mention the name, but it had a product, a blood thinner product. Aspirin is also blood thinner. And it was a twice a day product in the market. They developed extended release version of it. We went to the agency to talk with them that, listen, do we need to start all the preclinical and all that things? We ended up to not even require to do it in patients. We did it in PK, healthy subjects, because the issue was that the half-life. The drug was in market for a long time. From safety agency did not have any issue. Actually, that drug, I myself personally presented it to FDA advisory committee for approval many years back, and now is out of patent and still is twice a day. And we went to the agency. We said, now we can change the formulation, give you increase the half-life, so we can do it only once a day. We did not even do any clinical trial. We did, you may say that we did not do it in patients. We did it in healthy subjects.
I think we've reached the end of the Q&A. If we did not get to your question, we will follow up via email, and wanted to thank you for all the questions submitted. With that, Kazem, I will turn it back over to you for a quick recap. You can find us at info@amarexcro.com. That is posted in the chat, and we'll be sending out this presentation as well.